Hi, in this segment, I'd like to continue our discussion on some basic beliefs around metrics and leadership with regards to process. And in this segment, look at time scale. And by that, I mean two things. One is the time horizon of the metric. How big a data window is required for the purposes of a different role in the process? So do we need several days worth of data, weeks, months, years, and so forth? And the second is its refresh rate. How granular does that process metric need to be? Is it an hourly refresh, or can we use daily, or can it be aggregated to weekly? As we move from frontline staff and frontline leaders down the organization to executives, we are moving from metrics that directly measure the process, leading or lagging indicators, to process context. And by that I mean strategy, culture, behavior. For frontline staff and frontline leaders, one of their roles should be the execution of the process, but also its ongoing continual improvement. The process metrics, among other things, should help those folks detect problems in the process in a timely fashion and feed into short cycle root cause problem solving. When I say short cycle, we don't wait weeks and months to have problem solving on the process. It's very proactive, regular, short activities and frequent activities so that we can get on top of problems and, in fact, improve the process proactively, rapidly. Consequently, the kinds of process metrics that we want should be a shorter cycle in keeping with that short cycle problem solving. And so refresh rates, daily, hourly, are not unusual. In fact, you might want to have, in some cases where it's practical, real-time metrics. So for example, if we take the example of a fast food restaurant, we might determine that an important leading indicator of a particular process, say the frying of French fries, is the cooking oil temperature in that deep fryer. So we may want to have hourly probe data of that temperature, or in some cases, perhaps we can have real time. But in any case, taking that data once a day or once a week is not as helpful in that case. And consequently, the time horizon for that sort of process metric would not need to be weeks and months worth. In fact, having 2 years of cooking oil temperature data would be excessive and wasteful of time and energy to collect and keep and maintain that. As we move from the front line to mid-level leaders, they also generally are looking at direct or indirect measures of the process, but in keeping with their larger scale view of all the processes as mid-level leaders, they might, for example, instead of looking at the cooking oil temperature, look at longer-term data around the consistency and quality of French fry suppliers to their establishments. And consequently, they wouldn't want to look too microscopically at that. So daily or weekly measures of the supplier quality over several weeks or months is more appropriate. Remember also from going to the Gemba that being in the process in many cases is another, and in some cases the best form of process metric, if you will. So for example, for running a hotel or a restaurant, and we're in the place of the actual process and we see a queue forming, we don't need an Excel spreadsheet a week from now to tell us that that's happening. We're in the Gemba, we see it happening, we can respond in real time to that bottleneck, to that condition. Now to take that analogy further though, if over time we're finding that there's a lot more unpredictability in these waves of demand occurring, then mid-level leaders may need to look at a higher level at perhaps changes in traffic patterns and demand that we need to respond to at a more systemic level. And so there they would need to study that over several weeks and months with daily or weekly demand data. As we move to executives, so for example, if we're looking at the culture and behavior, an example would be the level of engagement of frontline staff, in their view, in problem-solving activities and how transparent or not they can be around identifying problems. So you might have an organization that, among other things, takes its pulse on that through an annual or twice-a-year employee engagement survey. And so here the refresh rate is every 6 months or once a year. And consequently, to pick up momentum and positive or negative trends in that particular indicator would take time over several years as you aggregate that and see, are we moving in the right direction, wrong direction, going nowhere, and so forth. At any time, corporate executives, either to understand an issue better or just out of curiosity, can and should take deep dives, into this more granular data. I think tools like Spotfire are making it less cumbersome and laborious to do that. Rather than taking reams of spreadsheet data and assembling it into PowerPoint decks for execs, if you use these new tools effectively, and of course you need to pick the right metrics and design them properly, but now you can have leaders being able to access, with a lot less work, these process dashboards in a timely fashion. Also, there's clearly a value in occasionally exposing frontline staff to the larger context of the work they're doing with these longer-term metrics to show the trends and patterns and to better understand why this strategy, how are we doing on our culture, and so forth. And so those are a few thoughts on metrics, process metrics, and how to focus them in on the roles that are played by different stakeholders in an organization.